The following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers and friends. This is the TFangy coming to what will hopefully be a successful review. And today we're going to be taking a look at a vintage Transformers action figure. Well, vintage in the sense that this figure came out 17 years ago. Oh, and from what I've seen in the years I've been collecting Transformers action figures, just like laptop computers, 5 years is roughly the amount of time to pass when a Transformers action figure is considered vintage, because by the time 5 years have passed since the figure was released, it's only available on the aftermarket for double or sometimes triple the retail price tag it originally sold for. But enough babbling. Today, this video review is on one of the more hard to find Transformers action figures from the 2007 first movie line, and it is the Transformers 2007 first movie deluxe class Allspark Power Decepticon Crankcase. So, like the other 2007 first movie figures that I've purchased recently off of Amazon over the last few months, Crankcase was a repaint of a figure that was originally released in the Transformers Cybertron line, and he was, like most of the figures that were repaints of Transformers Cybertron action figures that were released first back in 2006. Crankcase was sold at a Walmart exclusive, so if you were to time travel back to the year 2008, Transformers action figures that were sold exclusively at Walmart had these stickers on them saying that they're only sold at Walmart. In more recent years, rather than just selling exclusive products in the same exact packaging as figures sold at mass retail and then just slapping a Walmart exclusive sticker on it, Transformers figures that are sold exclusively at Walmart and Target now have their own style boxes to distinguish them from the mass retail figures. So, yeah, that was the only distinction at the time in the late 2000s, was a sticker verifying that it was sold only at Walmart. But yeah, here is Crankcase. He's a repaint of the Transformers Cybertron Deluxe Class Red Alert action figure, and I missed out on the original Cybertron Red Alert action figure, but this is not my first exposure to this mold. I did get the original Transformers Cybertron Deluxe Class Cannonball action figure, but I did not get Cannonball brand new. I got him at a used toy store where he was in pretty bad condition. He had a lot of paint chipped off of him, and he was missing all of his accessory pieces, and the paint chipping was so bad. My original Transformers Cybertron Cannonball figure, I customized him into a deluxe class action figure of Trailbreaker, because at the time I was technically only missing Trailbreaker from having deluxe class figures of the original lineup of 11 standard sized Autobots from the original 1984 cast. So yeah, the only other version of this mold that I've had in my collection until I got Crankcase this year was Cybertron Cannonball, customized into a custom action figure of Trailbreaker. It's not the best custom I've done, but yeah, it does what it does, being a custom figure of Trailbreaker. I'm not the only one who thought of the idea of turning Cybertron Cannonball into Trailbreaker. At the time when I found that figure, I saw other collectors had done the same thing already, and that's what actually inspired me. I apologize, I won't be bringing out my custom Cybertron Cannonball turned Cybertron Classics Trailbreaker figure, because it's buried in a bin along with a bunch of other Transformers action figures, but I will bring out some other figures that are relevant to this figure right here. But like I said, I found Cybertron Cannonball at a used store, or with all his accessory pieces missing, including the cyber key that activated the main weapon gimmick. And technically activating the weapon gimmick, it makes the first step in transforming the figure from alt mode to robot mode easier. So Crankcase is the first version of the Cybertron Deluxe Red Alert figure that I've gotten brand new with all the accessory pieces included. So that's what makes him special to me, is that this is the first version of the figure where I get all the accessory pieces included. So yeah, here he is in all his splendor and glory. He's mostly like indigo purple. On some of the product photos, it looks like a much darker purple. Depending on the angle of the light you shine on the figure. In some angles, it's a more muted purple. Purple, and like I said, it has kind of a bluish tint to it, so it's almost indigo. Oh, instead of true purple. But yeah, it's a nice shade for Crankcase. He does, you can't see it quite on the box, but he has a symbol on the side of his door saying there's a symbol of it on the box saying hazmat operations, so because the figure he's repainted from, Cybertron Deluxe Red Alert, was originally an ambulance, they just made him almost like a police hazmat team. And so he goes in and rather than disposing of hazardous materials, he dispenses hazardous materials. So yeah, and pretty nice for Crankcase to do here. Because he's a Decepticon, he's got a purple cyber key. Here it's the Planet X cyber key that originally was used on only 2 action figures on the Cybertron line, Deluxe Sideways and Voyager Soundwave. So yeah, the first movie line, having repaints of the Cybertron figures, it allowed for some of the cyber keys that weren't used as often as others to be used multiple times, so they aren't as unique as some collectors would like them to be. And like the other 2007 first movie figures, it's only the faction symbol that's painted silver on the key. On the original Cybertron line, the outer frames of the cyber keys were all painted silver, even though they were done in clear plastic, so the cyber keys for the 2007 first movie line aren't the focal point of this. The point is that these are just additional characters done to expand the number of Transformers serving under the first live-action movie versions of both Optimus Prime and Megatron. They just happen to rely on cyber keys to activate their weapons since they're recycled from the Cybertron line. So yeah, for what he is being a repaint of Cybertron Red Alert, Crankcase is a pretty decent deluxe class Transformers figure. So since he's a Decepticon, he's got the Decepticon faction symbol up here on the top of the box. The main gimmick with this subline was Allspark Power. And the idea is that the Allspark brought these Transformers. These were originally Earth-made vehicles that didn't have any life to them, and the Allspark gave them life for the first time. And because he's a straight-up repaint of the Cybertron Red Alert figure, Crankcase has the same face as Cybertron Red Alert. And because Cybertron Red Alert's face was painted, his helmet was painted navy blue. Crankcase's face being purple. It's not much of a color difference with Cybertron Red Alert. They gave him almost the same. They gave him Cybertron Red Alert's face was around his mouth was painted gold, just like Crankcase. So yeah, Crankcase looks more like Cybertron Red Alert's evil twin in versus being an entirely unique character. Coming on here to the back of the box, you got your product photos. You got robot mode, and his alt mode of a hazmat truck. The faction symbol there on the side of his doors, it says as hazmat operations. You've got the hazardous material symbol, you've got the nuclear sign, and the Decepticon faction symbol. So instead of cleaning up hazardous materials, Crankcase dispenses them. And of course, the cyber key activates his main weapon, which unfortunately it isn't actually pictured on the box, but I'll show it off when we get him out of packaging. And he's got a nice Movieverse Decepticon logo there on his chest. That's the same spot of the logo where every version of this mold has had it. Cybertron Red Alert had an Autobot logo there. Cannonball had a Decepticon on symbol there. I believe the Cybertron Red Alert mold was used. It was used at least 4 times. The 4th version of the mold was the BotCon 2008 Cup figure, which was the shattered glass version of Cup. So it doesn't say the number. Unlike modern Transformers boxes, it doesn't say how many steps it takes to transform Crankcase back and forth between his robot mode and his alt mode, but at the time in the late 2000s, instead of showing off the number of transformation steps, you had 2 things that went all the way back to the Generation 1 boxes, where you've got a full paragraph bio explaining who Crankcase is as a character, and then you've got tech specs showing all his strengths and weaknesses. And so the paragraph-long bio for Crankcase, it reads, Crankcase doesn't really care about Megatron. He just joined the Decepticons because he was in a bad mood, and it's pretty much lasted. As far as he's concerned, everything is pointless and stupid. He sees no reason why anyone else should be enjoying things when he's so miserable. That's why he spends his time and grumpily ruining things for Autobots and Decepticons alike. He's not much of a warrior, so he specializes in just being inconvenient. His blaster arm causes metal to rust instantly. So yeah, that going off that bio, Crankcase is just a grumpy guy suffering with clinical depression. So yeah, he is not a happy camper at all. He's not a pleasant guy to be around at all. He almost sounds like a less powerful version of Toxitron going off of that bio. So yeah, he and Toxitron could probably get along well, which is a horrible thought. And then for his tech specs, his strengths and weaknesses, he has a physical strength of 6 out of 10, intelligence of 5, speed 6, endurance 7, rank only 2, courage 5, fire blast 7, and skill of 3. So with a rank of 2, he is the lowest ranking of all the Decepticons. He is bottom tier. He's the cannon fodder that the Decepticons would send into battle first to get blown up by the Autobots to make way for other Decepticons. With a skill of 3, he's not that skillful at all. And so that ties into the bio I just read, where he's kind of useless to the Decepticons. Intelligence and courage are 5, so he has an average amount of intelligence and an average amount of bravery. So he's not that smart, and he's not that courageous. Strength 6 and speed 6, so he has a slightly above average amount of physical strength and a slightly above average normal amount of speed. So speedsters would be able to catch him easily. And then endurance and fire blast are 7, so his endurance 7, he has quite a bit of stamina, so he can take 1, maybe 2 punches before he's finished in a one-on-one fight. And with a fire blast of 7, he has a slightly above average amount of firepower, so he could be taken down very easily if someone could wait until he uses his armaments up. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Crankcase. That's all the basic information on him, so let's hurry up, get him out of the box, and take a close look at him in his alt mode. Alright, and so here is Crankcase out of the box, transformed into the mode he's come packaged in, which is his alt mode. There's his symbol. I apologize for my camera blurring it so badly, but it says hazmat operations. It's the same on both sides. It has the words hazmat operations on the top, and then right below it, it's got the hazardous material sign, the nuclear waste sign, and the Decepticon faction symbol there. Crankcase with his depressed mind, he's out to cause nothing but trouble for everyone. The cyber key gimmick plugs into the cyber key plugs into the back of his alt mode, and the cyber key gimmick is that when you press it in here, and this is one of the reasons why this mold, I think this version of Cybertron Red Alert, it loosely had some design cues based off of Generation 1 Crankcase, because the cyber key gimmick, when you push the cyber key in all the way, the main gimmick is that it pops out these 2 cannons on either side of the back of the alt mode. And in the Cybertron cartoon, Red Alert did use the cyber key gimmick when he was transformed into alt mode a couple of times. On the instruction sheets, each for the versions of this mold, from photos I've seen on the internet, they actually encourage you to activate the cyber key gimmick first to do the first step of transforming the figure into out of vehicle mode into robot mode. There was a handful of figures from the Cybertron line where you had to use the cyber key to activate the first step in transformation. Technically, the deluxe class Cybertron Red Alert mold, it's one of the figures where you don't have to activate the cyber key gimmick to begin in transformation. But it's just a fun step to do if you want. So yeah, those springs are still very springy. Even this figure came out back for the first time in 2008, so it spent the last 17 years inside the box. So the springs, even though they were sitting in the box 17 years waiting to be launched for the first time, they aren't worn out by any means. So yeah, the Cybertron action figures with the spring-loaded weapons gimmicks from the Cybertron line, they still hold up to this day. And these days, Hasbro and Takara have dropped gimmicks in favor of giving Transformers action figures more poses and more joints and articulation. So when the figures are transformed into their robot modes, modes, there's a lot more action poses that collectors can put the figures into, and I can kind of see why Hasbro and Takara do that, because most Transformers action figures and most Transformers fans and collectors, is what I was trying to say, they put their action figures up on a shelf, transformed most often into robot mode, and they just leave them standing there untransformed into alt mode. And not touching them really. So I can see the justification in Hasbro and Takara abandoning gimmicks in favor of robot modes that have more articulated joints and more the ability to do all sorts of action poses. Is in favor of gimmicks. So the figure does roll really well, but because of where the robot mode feet and the heel spurs on the back sit almost level with the wheels, especially here at the front, Crankcase is only going to be able to roll around on a solid flat surface, so he's not going to be able to go off-roading at any time soon. But again, as I said, the original Cybertron Red Alert Deluxe X-Class figure, just like his Armada counterpart, he was supposed to be a type of ambulance in its vehicle, and so I just really like that Hasbro and Takara, the designers, found a way of making Crankcase almost like an evil vehicle that, not necessarily evil, but it ends up being evil due to the fact that he's a Decepticon with this mold, by making him a hazmat unit truck. The sirens and the light bars, which do sit on either side of his robot mode head. Unfortunately, the Cybertron Deluxe Red Alert figure infamously, when you transform the figure into robot mode, the head, it sits on a spring, and then it automatically pops up, but there's nothing to cover it, and it doesn't sit down all the way. So in terms of being a robot in disguise, this mold fails at that. Fails at doing that. The idea was that the top of the head for this mold becomes the centerpiece for the main light bar siren on the roof. But yeah, you can't fool me. That is obviously a robot head there on the roof of this vehicle mode, so it's not much of a robot in disguise. But I still enjoy it. Now this is just a minor nitpick for me, but one thing I wish they would have done on here with Crankcase is that the original Cybertron Red Alert figure and also the Cybertron Cannonball figure that came out in the same line, the hubcaps on the wheels were painted on Cybertron Red Alert and Cannonball. Red Alert's hubcaps were gold and Cannonball's were silver. And so I kind of wish they would have painted the hubcaps of the wheels instead of leaving them unpainted black plastic. They do that more often these days. They did that for a while with quite a few Transformers action figures during the Prime Wars trilogy and the War for Cybertron trilogy, where wheels were just left unpainted. That was seen in a lot of Transformers action figures that came out in the Power of the Primes line. They started to go back to having painted wheels on a lot of the figures in the Legacy trilogy. But yeah, one could argue 2007 first movie Crankcase, here his unpainted wheels was one of the figures that inspired that idea of there's no need to paint the wheels on Transformers action figures, just leave them unpainted and then fans can enjoy having all black wheels on their Transformers action figures. I prefer painted wheels over unpainted wheels, and so that's just a bit of an eyesore for me. He comes with 3 accessory pieces, the first one being the Cyber Key. The other 2 are one of the reasons why I decided to get Crankcase when I saw him going for what I felt was a decent price on Amazon, because my Cybertron Cannonball was missing the other 2 accessory pieces, which store right here inside the hood of the vehicle mode. So just like the Armada version of Red Alert, when this mold was designed for its original use of being the Cybertron Deluxe class Red Alert action figure, when you transform the figure into robot mode, he has only one hand, just like Generation 1 Trailbreaker. And so you can put these 2 accessory pieces on the end of the arm that does not have a hand. So the figure can either have a sledgehammer or a claw that does open and close. It's only on one side. So you can have these 2 accessory pieces, so you can give the figure a claw hand or a hammer to bash things with. So those are just the other two accessory pieces there. So yeah, Crankcase is the only version of this mold where he has those accessory pieces included. They aren't missing. So to transform the figure, technically the first step could technically be to flip out the remove the cyber key gimmick and flip out the feet, the toes of the feet. That's the word I was looking for, and the heel spurs for the robot mode feet. That technically could be the first step, and so you can got some roll bars here. Here sitting on both the front and back of the vehicle. So if anyone were to try and rear end or back end or front end Crankcase, he has these barriers to protect him. Next, you want to untab the front section of the vehicle mode at the windshield, and be careful because these are clear plastic parts. It's the same with the front of the hood, which is the front of the legs. That's every version of this mold. These parts have been done in clear plastic just to give the figure clear wheels when transformed into alternate mode. So just be mindful of that. Before you pry the legs apart like I almost did right now. Now there's the front of the legs. Next thing you want to do is, and I recommend doing this here where you plug the spot with the cyber key, because the parts that flip out from the sides where the cannons deploy, they're made out of clear plastic as well. Same thing with the doors. Doors here, those are clear plastic parts as well. Also, the next step in the transformation is you want to unplug the back bottom from the top up very carefully. Like I said, this thing's been sitting in its box for 17 years, so it's stiff. It's never been transformed before, so bear in mind with me for a moment. So yeah, you want to unplug the bottom like this, and then before you bring the back sides of the legs down, you want to rotate the rear wheels into these cavities right here. Don't pull the legs apart out too far because they don't want to quite separate yet. And then make sure the joints are all lined up. Then you want to bring them together and sandwich them together like so. Oh, and as you can see by those lines going up and down the thighs for the upper legs of the bot mode, that's how the legs on the front and back form. So there's the legs done. Next step is pull out the head. Ed, if you have a long fingernail, then there's just enough of a lip right there on the top of the helm, on the top of the visor for you to pull the head out. So yeah, there's Crankcase's robot mode head, Ed deployed. Next step, and this is why they recommend on the instruction sheet you deploy the cannons first, because the next step you want to do is flip this out and then out, and deploying the cannons, it frees the robot mode backpack from these two clips on the side doors of the vehicle mode from being able to not get stuck so easily and prevent them and possibly break them. So yeah, just be mindful. I'd say about a third to half of the parts on every version of this mold. It's not just Crankcase, it's Cybertron Red Alert and also the original Cybertron Cannonball. This is clear plastic here. Now I don't remember off the top of my hand if Red Alert had this. Cannonball did not, but one thing they decided to do for Crankcase is if you look down here, that part right there next to my finger, that's the ball joint for the inside of the robot mode shoulder. So there it is. There's what it looks like at the top. So on Crankcase, the shoulder joints are made out of clear plastic. They were solid plastic. They are solid plastic on Cybertron Cannonball. I can verify that from having the original Cybertron Cannonball figure. Eager for having it for the past several years. So yeah, just be mindful that in terms of longevity, Crankcase has the least amount of longevity compared to the original version, the first two versions of this mold, due to those shoulder joints being made out of clear plastic, just like the windows and the sirens. So yeah, I kind of wish they would have just done the shoulder joints in the same bluish-purple color that a majority of Crankcase is cast in, instead of that clear yellow, greenish-yellow plastic. Two steps in the transformation I didn't show is that when you pull him out, the left side arm, which has as in the Armada cartoon, the Armada version of Red Alert, he used this as almost like a welder's torch, where he would weld machines together. But yeah, there's the laser gun hand, and which he has in place of a left side hand, and that's why I believe that both the Armada and Cybertron versions of Red Alert, at this point you can pry the legs apart. Unfortunately, the legs split apart all the way up to the hips, so to get him into a sprawl-legged pose, you unfortunately have to rip his pelvis in half. So yeah, think of whatever horror stories and horror jokes you have about seeing that happen with this mold. Oh, but yeah, this figure did both versions of Red Alert from the Unicron trilogy, Armada and Cybertron. They took a lot of loose cues. There was a bit of inspiration from Generation 1 Trailbreaker, with how the figure transforms, the type of vehicles they transform into, and the fact that you get only one hand, which, just like Generation 1 Trailbreaker, had only one hand, and it's here now. Now, another step in the transformation is that when you pull the doors out to the side, they're on this double hinge right here, ear facing forward. You have to get them into this position over here on the other side, where they're all the way out to the side, as wide as you could get them out. Get them out until they're just like that, and that gives you the shoulder doors, similar to what Red Alert had in Transformers Armada. To make them look like his Armada counterpart, you would technically have to fold the doors into the side like this, but then they totally block the elbow joints from being used, and so you'd have to move the arms up all the way at the shoulder joints like this. Technically, if you wanted to bend his elbows the wrong way, you could leave it, put his arms down like this, and then there's Armada. There's what I call the Armada Cybertron Red Alert pose. And so the idea is that after the events in Armada, Red Alert decided to, rather than have the doors of his Altmo be on the tops of his shoulders, he had them be on the outsides, since that was better cover fire from Decepticon on attacks. And then the last step is take this back section, fold it up on this double hinge joint like this, and this will form the backpack. And then actually there's one more step in the transformation. When you transform the figure into alt mode, there's these two little flaps here for the base of the torso. You have to flip them down, and there's the lower abs for the torso mode. You do have to rotate them up when you transform the figure into alt mode. If you leave them folded down like this in robot mode, when you go to transform the leg up, they'll stop them from completing transformation. So yeah, here is Crankcase in his robot mode, and like I said, since the figure has a laser gun hand and on the left side arm, the main gimmick is that with the accessory pieces you can attach the either the claw or the sledgehammer. Edge hammer on the arm, and you can give him a tool to use. If you want to leave them both off and just have him with the laser gun and at the end of his arm, then it's easy storage to get the sledgehammer and the hammer and the claw hand to go back into his leg. So yeah, they just store in those two accessory pieces store inside the hood, and the cyber key gimmick activates in robot mode as well. So flip it in. It's the same exact gimmick as alt mode, with the cannons folding out, popping out from the sides. Only now with the extra room of the with the backpack now facing this angle, rather than just coming straight out, the cannons can now and they're on springs, so it happens really fast. But they can now rotate 45 degrees and sit on Crankcase's shoulders and have them pointing forward. Here on the side of the box in the product photo for the raw mode, it shows that the cannons only go that far. Ours, they just pop out to the sides and still point If I can grab them with my fingers. It shows them just pointing upwards like this, but they do flip all the way forward. So it wasn't a good angle when I showed it off a second ago, so get these transformed really fast. So here's a really good angle of the cyber key gimmick when Crankcase is in robot mode. So insert the cyber key here on the back, push on it, and activate the cannons. And so yes, pretty impressive for a repaint of the Cybertron Red Alert action figure. In terms of articulation, the head is on a swivel joint. It's not even a ball joint. If I rotate the head around, there it is at the back, so it is just a swivel joint. So the head can spin clockwise and counterclockwise, 360 degrees. There is technically light piping on the visor for the figure. Same thing with the ears, but there's no light piping on the back of the head since that's where the screw that holds it together is in. So you're only going to get light piping if you shine lights through either one of Crankcase's ears to get his visor to light up. If you look at it from the side and you can get it at a good angle, you can see the light piping. My camera is picking up the light piping in the ears, but if you can get good enough light in there, the visor could light up. But it's a tricky style of light piping having to be done. And then of course the sirens and all the windows from the alt mode are made out of clear plastic. I'm slightly colorblind, so I believe it's supposed to be like a yellowish green that's used on here. But getting back to articulation, even with the cannons deployed, the arms are attached to the shoulder on a ball joint, but when the cannons are deployed, even when the cannons aren't deployed, the arms have the ability to still have the ability to spin 360 degrees of the shoulder, but it's hindered due to how entered to these wide doors here on the shoulder. But you can get the arms to rotate up to 90 degrees, which is kind of good. So that's why you bring that double hinge out all the way there to get the arms to rotate up to 90 degrees. If you don't, then the 90 degrees is hindered. Hinge joints at the elbows, no wrist swivels due to how the hands transform by folding up into the lower arms. But at least with the way that rotation joint is sculpted, it's not like it's a metal pin where it's just right below the wrist. There's it's the area of the amount of plastic used there. It's almost the same amount used as the fist, so it's not that hollow of a gap there on the lower arm. Due to how the legs transform, they can go this far out, and you actually split the figure open at the pelvis. If you don't want the pelvis to split up, then you do have to leave the legs pegged in together into what I call Generation 1 leg mode. A majority of the Generation 1 Transformers action figures, the legs didn't have the ability to split apart and move independently from each other, especially with the later Generation 1 figures released from 1988, 1989, and 1990. So, yeah, if you want the pelvis to not be split apart, you have to put the figure into Generation 1 leg mode. You do have hinged knees, even though the legs separate eight into two halves vertically to form the front and backs of the alt mode. You can get the legs to a decent knee bend, but the best knee bend can only be done if you remove the cyber key from the back. And you can get not quite 90 degrees due to the backpack being there, but at least it is there. The toes and the heel spurs can technically you can move both the toes and the heel spurs up and down, and then you can make it look like Crankcase is doing Crankcase is walking on tiptoe. If you want to make him slightly taller, but that just looks silly. Really? So yeah, that is 2007 first movie Crankcase. He is a straight-up repaint of Cybertron Red Alert. He's mostly purple, and according to the Transformers Wikipedia page, if I remember correctly, I believe this was only the second action figure to have the name Crankcase released after his original Generation 1 TriggerCon, so one could argue this was technically Hasbro's first attempt at releasing a Chug-style action figure of Crankcase way back in the spring of 2008. Alright, and just to end off the review for some size comparisons in robot mode, here is 2007 first movie Crankcase with Legacy Crankcase and Legacy Cannonball. So yes, this version of Crankcase, for those of you who weren't aware that it existed, because he's a straight up repaint of Cybertron Red Alert, just like the original Cybertron Cannonball was a figure of, similar to how for the Legacy line, G1 Crankcase and technically Cybertron / G1 Cannonball here. They're both retools of the Legacy Skids mold, but Crankcase and Cannonball being mold mates with each other, that's nothing new. It actually happened for the first time back in 2008. So the Legacy versions of these two characters being mold mates with each other, it echoes what Hasbro did with the original Cybertron Red Alert mold in using it for Cannonball and Crankcase respectively. So yeah, I think that's a nice way that Hasbro paid a tribute to the original Cybertron repaints of Cybertron Red Alert with the Legacy figures of these guys. So here's a live action movie, the first version of Crankcase with his G1 version, just like a handful of the other Transformers characters from the first movie line, such as Voyager class Mudflap, which I reviewed on a few weeks ago. Crankcase, one of the main reasons he was given a figure in the first movie line was because Hasbro had a registered trademark on his name at the time, and this was a way of renewing it. Crankcase, a new version of Crankcase would eventually appear in Transformers Dark of the Moon. So this action figure is it's the first attempt at bringing a Transformers character to the live action movies, but it's not the final and most well known version. But it's still a fun figure to have, and I do not regret getting this version of Crankcase and adding it to my Transformers collection. But like I said, the original Cybertron Cannonball figure was a straight up repaint of Cybertron Red Alert like this guy. So if you can imagine this guy, imagine these colors on this action figure, there you've got the original Cybertron Cannonball figure. And just to get a look at it, there's the two Cyber Keys. The Legacy Cyber Key versus the original Cybertron Cyber Key side by side. So yeah, huge size difference between those two Cyber Keys. Then on functional one versus the gimmick activating one. Depending on how far apart you have his legs sprawled, even if you bring them together, the original first movie Crankcase figure, he's slightly shorter than the Legacy Skids mold, so Legacy Crankcase, Ace and Cannonball stands slightly taller than he does at the head. But in terms of bulk, and also heftiness, like picking these two figures up here, as you can see, as I try and lift them up with the same amount of effort, this version of Crankcase has a lot more weight to him, and he's a much bulkier action figure compared to Legacy Cannonball and Legacy Crankcase here. So here, I apologize for not doing a size comparison in alt mode. I forgot when I was getting Cannonball and all in Crankcase ready for size comparisons. I forgot that Crankcase, like most of the figures in the first movie line, they were released at a time when Transformers action figures were still packaged and sold, transformed into their alternate modes. For years, Transformers figures were packaged in alt mode. Being packaged in robot mode was the exception. Then, starting with the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen line in 2009, and then the Hunt for the Decepticons line the next year in 2010, Hasbro reversed it, and robot mode, being packaged in robot mode was the norm, and being packaged in alt mode was the exception. So I apologize for not doing alt mode comparisons of 2007 first movie Crankcase with Legacy Crankcase and Cannonball, but here they are in robot mode. Just to give you an idea of how bulky of a deluxe figure this version of Crankcase is. So for the final proverbial question, do I recommend getting the 2007 first movie Crankcase and having it in your Transformers collection? I do recommend getting this because it's a fun repaint of the Cybertron Deluxe Red Alert figure, and overall, Crankcase has become a favorite character of mine. I don't like his depiction in Transformers Dark of the Moon, but I love his Generation 1 TriggerCon self. And so if you can imagine Generation 1 TriggerCon Crankcase done as a movieverse action, as a movieverse or Bayverse Transformers character, then the 2007 first movie action figure of Crankcase that Hasbro released exclusively at Walmart in 2008 for the first movie line, and it is a good imagining of that. And technically one of the reasons why they went with purple for this version of Crankcase instead of black like his G1 figure is because technically the mold was already done in black when it was done as Cybertron Cannonball in the original Cybertron line in 2006, 2 years earlier. But of course this figure was released in 2008, as I keep saying, so he is a vintage Transformers figure. The only way you're going to find him is on the aftermarket for almost quadruple the price. I paid close to $40 for Crankcase when I found him on Amazon, and at the time when he was released in 2008, those were the last days when deluxe class Transformers were still available for just $10 US retail here in the United States. So it's next to impossible to find any of the deluxe figures from the 2007 movie line selling for the same retail price tag they went for back in 2007 and 2008. So I only recommend getting this version of Crankcase if you're into collecting all of the action figures that were released in the first 2007 movie line, and if you're a fan of the action figures that were released in the Transformers Cybertron line in 2005 and 2006, and you enjoy the mold so much you like to buy repaints of them, because that's what this version of Crankcase has going for him is now that there's been more action figures of Crankcase released in more recent years, what this version has going forward is being a purple Decepticon repaint of the Cybertron Deluxe Class Red Alert figure. So if you're an avid fan of the Cybertron series and you like Crankcase as a Transformers character, then this is an action figure to get. If you aren't necessarily a fan of both the Cybertron series and Crankcase as a Transformers character, if you're only a fan of Crankcase, or if you're only a fan of the Cybertron line, then this figure can be an easy pass. And if you're neither a fan of Crankcase as a character, he's not one of the characters you're necessarily into, and you aren't into the Transformers Cybertron series, then this figure can be an easy pass. But I do recommend getting it just for the sake of having another action figure of Crankcase in your Transformers collection. Even if you have the Legacy Crankcase figure and even Legacy Cannonball, I still recommend getting this figure if you can find it at a decent price like I did on Amazon. I believe the seller that I purchased Crankcase from, this is the last copy that person had, so I think if there's any copies of Crankcase still selling on Amazon, they're selling for even more than what I paid for him. But if you decide to get this figure, I hope I inspired you to consider the possibility of adding 2007 first movie Crankcase to your Transformers collection. So until next time, you guys, this has been the TFN Geek, and this has been my look at the 2007 first movie Walmart exclusive deluxe class Crankcase figure. If you like the way this figure looks, I highly recommend getting it. If you don't, then it can be an easy pass. But until next time, you guys, please remember to stay safe, stay healthy, transform and roll out. Goodbye, everyone.